just like we're going to be denying on Monday the Martin Luther King Association while we talk endlessly about the Donald Trump Association. So the war. And the United States decides to go in for and round up the usual Europeans to go with you. Okay, how do you fight the war? And this goes to something said before, and I want to conclude with. The United States is caught in the decline, discovering that the decline trumps everything else. And I don't mean to be clever by using the word trumps. The nuclear weapons of the United States are useless. The enormity of them, useless. Why? Because if you dared use them in Ukraine, the other side has them too, and will use them. And they've made that quite clear. So you can't, because it's self-destructive. So that's out. Well, what do you have? Conventional warfare. But then you got another problem. The Russians are better equipped for that than you are. The Russians also have a history, in case you're not familiar with it. Napoleon thought he could defeat Russia. He couldn't. Hitler thought he could defeat Russia. He couldn't. Invading Russia has turned out to be, or fighting Russia, a really bad idea. But the United States, used to fighting such powerhouses as the poorest countries on earth, Vietnam, Afghanistan, didn't make the adjustment. So it can't fight. It realized that within months. So it came up with the great plan, the genius of Mr. Blinken or Jake Sullivan or other people who I hope whose names mean nothing to you, because they sure mean nothing historically. Here's what their great strategy was: a war of sanctions. Oh, we will get the Russians. We will, I'm now quoting President Biden, reduce the ruble to rubble. Somebody with poetic genius gave him that one. The ruble will become rubble and Russia will fall to its knees. Wonderful images right up there with Mickey and other mouses in the American consciousness. And they did. They stopped. The Europeans, if you know the story, stopped buying oil and gas from Russia, which is a major export of the Russian economy. And that would cripple Russia. It was the idea. Problem. Russia is part of the BRICS. And the Russians went to the Chinese and the Indians and said, they won't buy our oil and gas. We need to sell the oil and gas. How about you buy our oil and gas? Done, said Mr. Modi. Done, said Xi Jinping. And thereby the American strategy went, along with everything else, into the toilet. Didn't work. Total fail. Russian rubles, fine. Russian economy, in case you don't know, has grown faster over the last 2 years than the American economy has, which should surprise no one. Because remember how we as a nation got out of difficult economic times known as the Great Depression? We went to war in World War II.
The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. A white economic professor, Richard D. Wolff, powerful revelations concerning Donald Trump being the president of the United States of America and its implications and what it has on the blacks, especially African Americans who are living in the United States of America. According to him, there are a lot of things that they cover up when it comes to the United States of America, like the wars that they've lost. They fought a lot of wars and they lost. And these things, they try as much as possible to cover them up so that these negative aspects of the American wouldn't come out. Because America has been projected to be the superpower, the giant. America always wins in every aspect. that America used to be the nation that was inclining, but now America is declining and America is losing to BRICS. Now BRICS has become the superpower of the world.
So one of them to start, is a little bit about what a declining empire means, just to give you the context. The United States lost the war in Vietnam. When I say that in my classes, my students look at me, they never heard such a thought. America, as they know from the comic books they read as children, only wins wars. It doesn't lose wars, but we lost. The war was fought against the Communist Party of North Vietnam, which has been running that country since the United States was driven out in 1975. Go check all of this. You will find I'm not making it up. After we lost the war in Vietnam, we went and had a big war in Afghanistan, which we also lost. That war was against the Taliban, which now runs that country, which is a good sign that you lost. We lost the war in Iraq. We are in the process of losing the war in Ukraine. But the split in the country is, if I were in certain audiences, I wouldn't dare say what I just said, because they couldn't hear it. They could not hear it. Let me give you a couple of more, just bits of getting what decline means. Last week, something happened on the part of a country called Indonesia. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a remarkable country in Asia made up of 18,000 islands in the Pacific. It's a huge country. The population of Indonesia is 280 million people, makes it one of the largest countries in the world. Let me remind you, the population of the United States is 330 million. 280 isn't that far less than 330. It's an enormous thing. What they did, they joined the BRICS. They joined a full partner of the BRICS. BRICS, by the way, means it's the first letters of the countries Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. A dozen years ago, they began to form an alliance of what came to be called the Global South, to be independent, relatively, from the domination of the United States. And the core economy there, the biggest one, the most powerful, is, I'm sorry to tell you this, I know it'll come as an upset, the People's Republic of China. Remember, I'm the messenger. I have no responsibility for this at all. China and the BRICS. Indonesia joined them. Together now, the BRICS, built around China, have as the population of the countries that are part of the BRICS, about 22 countries now altogether. They have about 55 to 60% of the population of the world are members. What is the percentage of the world's population of the United States? 4.5%. You understand? We are 4.5%. They are 50 to 60%. Okay, so if you take the BRICS together now, they are about 35%, maybe a bit more. Total output of the world. If you add up each of those countries' total output in a year, and you add them up, they account for 36%, more or less, of the world's output. Now let's compare that to the United States and its major allies. Those are called the G7, the group of seven. The United States, Japan, Canada, Britain, France, Italy, and Spain. And Britain, excuse me. Okay, that used to be the dominant player of the world. That used to be what world trade meant, what they did. Together that's all of them, now account for about 28%. of the world's output. Do you understand? The BRICS is now what the United States was, but is no more. Now, if you're looking to where the wealth is, you go east, not west. If you're a poor third world country, as we used to call them, and you need money for a build railroad, or you need to find places to sell your exports, you direct your diplomats first to go to Beijing, because that's where it's at. If you can't get a good deal there, well, you might go to London or Washington. But whatever you are doing, you're going to play them against each other. You're going to say to the Americans, oh, that's the best you offer? Let's go the other place, see what they offer. You want to know why most of the railroads being built in Africa today are being built by the Chinese? There's your answer. They got a better deal. Everything is changing because of this, except here, where the make-believe is the way this country is dealing with this. Denial. We ought to ask Dr. Fra to help us with the understanding psychologically. We all know it from our personal lives, right? When we've lost a friend or a lover, and we had to wait until all our friends told us what we couldn't face ourselves. Well, we are the friends in this country who are being unable to vent. That's why what Indonesia did last week is something I'm not going to ask how many of you noticed it, because nobody will raise their hand. How could you? Make-believe made sure that that was not on the newspaper's front page, or in most newspapers on any page ever. How many of you know that the Chinese are now the fast-growing dominant economy in the world? We're not. We haven't been for a while. Every major high-tech firm in this country has an analog in China. When we heard earlier that there was an offer by China and by Russia to work with the United States earlier, which the United States turned down, that's part of denial. They didn't just turn it down then, they turned it down now. One more example, and then I'll stop and tell you what this all means. 15 years ago, every automobile company on this planet went to work trying to develop what they understood was the next wave in that business, which was putting aside the gasoline-powered car and substituting an electric-operated car or truck. By the way, not a rational response, because it's terribly wasteful to have that vehicle, which those of you who have it notice, sits on the street or in the garage most of its life. That's kind of, let's use a fundamental word, stupid. It's stupid. It's a waste of resources. That car could serve 20 people each day if it were managed properly. What do I mean managed properly? Well, like a car rental business, that's how they would manage that. Or those bicycles we can now just take off the rack and put back on. That's a rational way. If you want to avoid killing people, which private cars do, if you want to avoid air pollution, cars are the major cause of it, and on and on. Rational would be to go from the private car to a mass transit efficient system. A beautiful train every 5 minutes, a beautiful bus, even more beautiful, every 3 minutes, everywhere. That's it. Infinitely cheaper, much more efficient. And none of you have to worry about it, because wherever it's parked in the central lots, which we call car rental centers, there would be paid mechanics who make sure they're in proper condition. So the car would be in better shape, better cared for. The whole thing is nuts. And who is the person who invented this crazy bad solution to the fuel-burning car? That genius who did this terrible thing, Elon Musk. That's what he did. He found the way that automobile companies could make a profit by taking us out of gas cars into electric cars. So 15 years ago, all the car companies said, hooray, here's how we hold on to our profits by making these private cars for everybody. And they all went to work to compete. And there was a winner. As of 3 years ago, one company figured out how to make the best quality electric cars and trucks at the lowest price, which is what competition is supposed to result. And I'm sure you all know the name of this company. It's the BYD Corporation. Let me do that again. B as in boy, Y as in yellow, D as in dog, BYD. Now, your faces give you away. You never heard of this place or this thing. What is it? Well, what did I just tell you? They won the competition for the entire new wave of cars and trucks moving across this planet every day by the millions. And you never heard of them. Why? Because they move everywhere except here. If you go to Europe right now, you'll see them all over the roads. BYD, and by the way, there's several Chinese car companies. They're not the only one. They're just the ones who did it best. Why don't you see them? Because we have a tariff started by Mr. Trump, raised by Mr. Biden. The tariff on the Chinese electric vehicles is 100%. So let me explain quickly what that means. The Chinese produce this wonderful thing, this electric vehicle, and let's take a simple number. $30,000 is what they cost for the car. You're an American. You need, therefore, to come up with $30,000 if, for example, you're a company that uses electric trucks to do part of your business. It's an input. You'd have to come up with $30,000 to get the truck. And then you'd have to pay 100%. Another $30,000 will going to Uncle Sam, who put the tariff. Tariff is just a word for a tax. It's a word for a tax on an imported good or a service, something that produced out of the country but brought in here for sale. That's what an import is, and tariff is the name of the tax you put on imports. We have been putting taxes on imports as a nation from the beginning. Although throughout the history, there's nothing new about it. But it's 100%, which means an American would have to buy that truck by giving China 30 grand for the truck, and Uncle Sam another 30 grand, and so with 60 grand, you get the truck. But of course, no one does that. Why? Because Ford and General Motors and Tesla will sell you an electric car or truck for a mere 40 grand or 50 grand or something like that. So who's helped by this? Ford and General Motors. They wouldn't be able to sell their crappy cars otherwise. None of us buy a $40,000 or $50,000 electric car if we're going to do that, and give BYD 30,000 for a better car rather than 40 or 50,000 to General Motors, however patriotic we might feel. And you know who knows it? Ford and General Motors. So they went to the president and they said, put that tariff there. It'll protect us. Of course, they didn't say our profits, which is the truth. It'll protect jobs. Whenever you hear a capitalist tell you about what they're doing to protect jobs, hold on to your wallet. Someone's reaching. Why is it false? Because this is a terrible act for most American producers. Think of yourself as a maker of shirts or of chairs or of software programs. You would like to buy the trucks you need to bring in your inputs, to sell and distribute your outputs. You're going to have to buy electric trucks. You'd like to buy the best one at the lowest price. Of course, you're competing with enterprises in France and in Germany and in Brazil and in Nigeria and fill in the blank. They're all buying BYD cars at 30 grand. You have to pay 40 or 50 to General Motors. You know what that means? They're going to defeat you economically. You're going to be loser. And when you lose, you're going to lay off your workers because you can't compete with the companies that can buy the biggest, the best, and the cheapest electric vehicle. Now multiply this by dozens of other commodities. China is winning. We are losing. Shh. Don't tell anyone. Because you live in a country which is pretending to itself that none of this is going on. It's either never discussed or we turn it around and we say, the Chinese are becoming aggressive in the world. Huh? They're doing what exactly we did. You know how the United States became a big, powerful country? By doing to Europe what the Chinese are doing to us. It's not new, it's not different. The only question is, why would it be surprising? What a strange behavior is going on here. Now, where is this taking us? And I have a few things, and that's all I really want to tell you. Mr. Trump is a problem. You've probably already noticed that. And one of the ways he's a problem is that he has come this far as a politician. He had a different life before. It's known as a playboy. So he went from a New York playboy to a national politician, maybe even an international politician. And he did it in one basic way. He understood, maybe it's not clear, he understood that America was in such trouble that the mass of people here were remarkably alienated from the conventional Republican and Democratic parties. They didn't feel those parties were doing much for them, which is true. That those parties weren't protecting them from a decline they couldn't quite pinpoint, but they felt, particularly over the last 30 years. Their budgets were squeezed. You might have noticed that 40 years ago, the level of household debt in this country was small. Nowadays, everybody is loaded with debt. I can add, if you're interested, that corporate debt is at a higher level than it's ever been in our country, and government debt. In other words, we are a country in debt on a scale we didn't imagine 10 years ago, let alone think we would have now. There's a name for companies that have been for several years so deeply in debt that they don't make enough profit, ready, to service their debt. That is, to pay the interest and the portion they have to repay. And we have a special name in economics for them. I kid you not, I didn't make this up. Zombie corporations, because they're dead. They're economically defunct. You know how they manage to survive when their profits aren't enough to cover their debts? They take on more debt to pay the debt they couldn't otherwise cover. That makes them more zombie-ish next year than they were this year, which is what's happening. You might wonder, who lends money to all these indebted people, businesses, and government? Well, let me start with the government, because if you thought the world was crazy before, wait till you get this. The two biggest creditors of the United States government are Japan and China. Japan number one, China number two. A few years ago, it was the other way. China was number one, Japan was number two. The United States is the biggest debtor country in the world by countries. The second biggest creditor of the United States as the biggest debtor is the People's Republic of China. Do you understand? The United States owes China $850 billion, roughly. It has to pay interest, of course, on that debt, like it has to pay on others. Which means I'm here to tell you that a portion of the taxes every one of you in this room pays when you buy a bottle of beer or you smoke a cigarette or you pay your taxes, a portion of that money, you should be very pleased, is collected by the United States government, not used for houses or medical care or student loans, but shipped to China as interest on the debt to enable them to build their military capacity to fight the United States. Hello. I didn't make this up. On the other hand, think of it this way. These kinds of loans from Japan, from China, enable the United States government to spend all the money Dr. Leon told us about in Ukraine without having to tax us. Because you know what would bring the war in Ukraine to an end in about 10, maybe 11 seconds? If Americans had to pay for it. But we don't. The Chinese and the Russians, and China, by the way, supports Russia against Ukraine, but lends government money to the United States, which pays for the Ukrainians. Whoa. You think you ought to pay respect to a system working like this? Think. We are in a completely different world than we once were. The empire is declining. We are not strong. We are weak. We don't produce the bulk of the world's output. We don't control the bulk of the world's trade. The US dollar, which in 1950s, 60s, 70s was the global currency dominating all others, isn't anymore. Central banks around the country, which used to hold dollars as backing for their own currencies in their own countries because the dollar was as good as gold, it isn't anymore. So the dollar, from being 70, 80% of the reserves held by central banks, is now about 40%. Still important. We're still in a big industrial power, but nothing like we were. Now, Mr. Trump understood that in this changing world, Americans were being squeezed. And he was right about that. And you should understand that we're still in that situation, and Mr. Trump is president because of it. Here's how it works. Every empire, as it goes down, has the following procedure of handling it. The people at the top, the rich and the powerful, respond to the decline by saying, oh, this is terrible, but not for me. The top always offloads the difficulties and burdens of a decline onto those people less powerful and less rich than themselves. The emperor in Rome didn't suffer the way the average people did. The emperor in Persia or the emperor in Greece, it doesn't matter. All the empires show the same phenomena. Those at the top hold on, work harder than they used to hold on because they know damn well it's going down. And who can't do that are the people who don't have much power and the people who don't have much wealth. And so the working class has to be, one way or another, squeezed as you go down. And we, you, me, we're all being squeezed. And in our naivete, we turn to the Republican and Democratic Party. Protect us. They can't. Oh, they'll tell you whatever you want to hear. You know that. We live in that. But they can't do anything. Because the only real thing to do would be to say honestly to the people, oh, our empire is going down, it's going to be a hard thing, and maybe we all ought to get together to try to get through this difficulty together. Oh, that would be an interesting idea. Would have a name like, I don't know, socialism. That would be rational. But we don't live rational. How do you squeeze the mass of people? A lot of ways. It's a little bit like that famous poem, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. How am I going to screw the working class? Let me count the ways. So for 40 or 50 years, we make sure that unions can't function. They can't do what they were invented to do, help the workers get a better deal. Not going to get that. We're going to demonize unions. We're going to make every union look like it's that movie On the Waterfront, a bunch of crooks that are grabbing your dues every week, et cetera, et cetera. You've been living your life in that kind of an environment. It's changed the last few years as working people begin to get it. And they are. That's part of what this meeting is a sign of. Beginning. The Starbucks workers are beginning, and the Amazon workers are beginning. The labor movement is kind of coming back to life, but it's coming late in the process of squeezing the working class. Here's another way you squeeze the working class. You have this thing which you say is some kind of mystery. It's called an inflation. So, what? An inflation sounds like something you do to a balloon. What is an inflation? In economics, it just means prices are going up. But now let's be a little bit more careful. If you know anything about the inflation of the last few years, here's a little statistic. The inflation has gone up faster than average wages and salaries of people. Okay, now I'm going to do this very difficult arithmetic. If the money you have to spend, your wages and salaries, are not going up as fast as the prices, there are going to be things you can't afford anymore. Really special, expensive things like eggs. Right? What? But will someone honestly tell you that the inflation is a way of squeezing the workers? Not you look long and hard, you won't get it. The inflation in eggs is due to bird flu. Huh? What? What? Look, I'm talking to people. I'm not going to be mean, but half of you believe that. And the other half of you think it might be true. Here's what an inflation is. It's a decision made by some people to jack up the price you have to pay for the things they can control the prices of. Who sets prices in a capitalist economy? Answer: the employer. Those of you who have had jobs all your life as workers, do you ever recall being called into an office to add your opinion as to what the price should be of what you helped to produce? Never happened. The United States Census tells us 3% of Americans are employers. Welcome to the other 97%. That's you and me. The employers set the prices. We pay them. When they jack up the price, that's because they want to give us fewer of whatever it is they make for the money we have to give them. It's a way of screwing the working class. And that's how it's been used in the last few years. And all these economics professors, including many of mine and people I know, sit around debating how are we going to control the inflation? What is it? And how does it happen? I sit there, I'm one of their students, and I want to run up there and hit them over the head with a ping pong paddle. What are you doing? What is this noise coming out of your mouth? And then their decision, which really, at this point, I hope I'm getting to you, you're getting upset. Their decision is we're going to deal with it by raising interest rates. Oh, wow, this is wonderful. Who gets screwed when you raise an interest rate? In case you're not rich yourself, I'm going to tell you, it's not rich people. They don't give a flying whether the interest rate is 2%, 6%. They're rich. That's what it means to be rich. You don't care. But you have to care because it's going to mean that little bit of money at the end of the month that you have to pay on your credit card is going to be bigger than it was before. And everything works like that. The rich don't care. You know what that's like?
And everybody is now moving towards the BRICS alliance. Now, when we look at Indonesia, Indonesia is a very big country with a very large population. And now they have moved to join the BRICS. And now they are full members. That BRICS was just formed by 5 nations, and they used the names of the nations to form the name of the alliance. America was dominating the world and always trying, the bossy lifestyle of America. So other people are tired, and they have to look at other ways that they can also be free to do their things without America having upper hand on them. So in actual sense, they're just looking at means and ways to also weaken America. That an empire that we have reason to know hasn't fallen for centuries. But sometimes empires also do fall, and that is what has happened to the United States of America, even though they are trying to cover it up. But this isn't going to work, because that this capitalist system that we are living is against the people. They are suppressing the people. It's either you rule for the majority or you rule for the minority. And America is that kind of ruling for the minority because it is a capitalist system. Now, when we look at the United States of America, it has allies called the G7, because we all need people around us to also be bossy, so that you can fight when things are going somehow. You have people that will come in and support you. So everybody needs allies. So the United States of America have to form this G7 thing, and now they are working together as a people. And this is what America is using as a superpower, and it's getting its strength from. That these people have 2 things that they do best. And the reason to which Trump had the opportunity to come into the scene, he studied the system and he realized what the people want, and he capitalized on that, and he became the president of the United States of America. And that the things that he did before, there's nothing that he's going to change. The man can never change. That's who he is. People under the Democrats were saying Biden didn't do A, B, C, D, and he promised them. So he will look at the loopholes in other aspects, then he will now capitalize on it and send his message, and people bought into the message that the capitalist system is not there to help the people. It's rather there to suppress them, to make them poor, that the vast majority will work for the minority, and these people make profit on the sweat and labor of the minority. So as other people are working and becoming poorer, the capitalists are becoming richer. So they have created a system to make people work and get less. You suffer, you waste all your time to make them rich. So people buy your time to become rich. And this has been the system that is ongoing in the United States of America, because it is a capitalist system and they do not want to do away with it. So what they do best is to always brainwash the people into believing that A isn't doing the right thing. So give me the chance, whatever that your problem is, when I come, I am going to solve it. So that has been the approach of the capitalists. When Trump came, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, is no longer useful. So he has to kick him out. So what they do is, if they are not getting anything out of you, they have to pack you aside. Then they bring in somebody. So we should not be deceived by the things that we see and hear. That great American this, great American that, because they make sure the papers never bring out anything negative concerning them. They decide, they rule, they control, they decide what we should hear, what we should see. So that's why we are not seeing most of the bad things that are happening. It's so painful that these people are doing everything possible. Even the black people, those that are rising up, these people still kept systems in place to cripple them. You have to always be at the bottom so that they can rule over you, control you, and do whatsoever that they want. That's why they don't want the socialist kind of government, because when it comes, this doesn't help them in any way. And these people always want to push the agenda across. The man, the expose, the things that he brought out, they are very touching and scaring to our brothers, and that you should not expect anything good coming in from Donald Trump. And all the policies that he's going to implement are going to go against African Americans who are living there. So it is high time that you, the Americans, the black Americans, you start seeing your blacks like you are one. Some of you think that because you are African American, you are not a black person. And some of you, the kind of statement that you bring out is very touching. So because you don't know the systems in the United States of America, you don't know what is happening around you. So your black people are not your enemies. We are one people. And these people will fight you because they see that you are not one of them. Your color is different. That's why they've named you African Americans. They have never called you an American because they know that your color is different from them. And from slavery till date, they have made you their slaves, because they make sure that the kind of things that they'll put in place will never favor you, the black person. So we have to unite and fight for the freedom that we are looking for. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we stand together forever and ever as black people. So that's the latest around the world and in the United States of America.